Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back on the final day of our webinar series taking place over this week. I would like to remind you that you're able to engage with the panel using Slido, which you will see on the right-hand side of your screen. This is where you can submit questions for the panel, which will be covered at the end of our discussion during Q&A. I would now like to introduce the panel who will be joining me today to discuss the adoption of Agile work practices at scale within European wholesale markets. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by a stellar lineup of speakers. Cécile Bartonieff, Chief Operating Officer, Global Banking and Investor Solutions, and Global Head of Technology and Operations, Société Générale. Stella Clark, currently the Chief Marketing Officer of Murex, previously ran Technology and Operations for Global Markets at a large Southeast Asian bank. Antoine Vonk, Chief Operating Officer, Financial Markets and Lending, ING Wholesale Banking. Rob Fanshawe, Chief Organization Officer, Finality. And last but not least, Gagan Bhatnagar, Partner across EMEA Financial Services at Ernst & Young. Gagan, if I can start with you, in a nutshell, what is Agile? What are some of the core principles firms should consider in their Agile transformation journey?
Thanks, Emmanuel, and good afternoon, everybody. Obviously, a great place to start. I believe, actually, if you truly want to understand what something is, you should understand where it came from. And Agile in banking has its roots in manufacturing, principally pioneered by Xerox, by Honda, and by Canon. And what they wanted to do was to pioneer ways to innovate commercially successful, customer-friendly products much faster than the competition. And what they realized is that it's better to innovate in small steps than in the giant leaps of evolution that they had traditionally done. So their idea was to set up multidiscipline cells who would own everything from design to development to manufacturing to maintenance and operation. And they found that was extremely successful as a model for developing much more commercially successful products in their market. And what I have just described is basically the Agile DevOps model that we see in banking these days, which just goes to show that, frankly, there's nothing new in the world, really, is there? There are a number of underpinning principles and characteristics to the Agile model. The first being that the teams are organized into multidiscipline cells, including service, business, technology, operations, support, etc. And those cells are self-governing. And the delivery is organized into short sprints, where a sprint is the end-to-end delivery of a product, and where we have the concept of MVP, minimum viable product, and that is the product of the first sprint, which then gets iterated as you go through subsequent sprints. You also have very fast feedback, almost real time, based on leading indicator quantitative metrics, as well as feedback from your customer or whichever stakeholder has the greatest interest in the successful outcome of your product. And so the feedback drives very rapid course correction, driven by all of those things. Probably the final characteristic and principle that I'd like to kind of outline, which is, in my mind, the most important one, is that of organizational agility. So these teams are, by their nature, very responsive, and they're in part of an organization which, as a whole, is very responsive. And frankly, these people have to be comfortable with trashing their own work if the data tells them to. So this is not about kind of being wedded to a particular product just because you came up with it. This is about being wedded to a product that is absolutely aligned with the outcomes that you need.
Thank you, Gagan. So it seems we have differences between Agile, for example, applied in the technology space versus Agile applied at the organizational level. Stella, Murex produced a report with me in September looking at Agile at scale adoption in new wholesale markets. Do you agree that there are differences? And does Murex, a large technology provider for financial institutions, look at Agile?
Actually, I feel that the principles remain the same, the principles that Gagan just shared with us. However, the implementation might differ. if you look at it, Agile was adopted in IT in the early 2000s, and to solve really the lack of flexibility of the waterfall approach to software development lifecycle and IT project delivery. At the time, it was impossible to accommodate a change at a later stage of a project without, encountering increased cost and a lot of delays. Since then, agile practice in development have been supported by other techniques, I will say, that are complementary, in particular Devops, that basically breaks the silo between development team and operation team. So we can now run and change at the same place and at the same time. And techniques like continuous integration and continuous delivery that has decreased drastically the time needed to bring a change into a production environment. So for us at Murex, clearly we leverage agile work practice both in our software development capability and in the delivery of our solution for our clients. We adopted agile in development roughly 10 years ago, but in 2016 we decided to adopt the SAFe approach. Why and why did we decide to move to agility at scale? It was key for us to be able to adjust our priorities in development faster because we had to deal with a very high pace of change, both in new technology or changes in financial market. At the time, remember, it's when a lot of the regulatory changes were coming with Basel implementation, like FRTB, SIM, etc. And for us, because we are a large organization, we really had to find the right balance between agility and autonomy, but also coordination across a very large team of hundreds of people supposed to work together to deliver, the best outcome across domain as, different as front office or back office or risk. Okay. And of course, we wanted to be able to release these changes to our end user faster than we used to do. So it took us roughly 20 months to deploy SAFe across the organization. And today we have over 1,000 employees in our software development capabilities spread across 80 agile teams and 12 agile trains, which, if you want, is a larger container to deliver those changes. And what we have observed in the last couple of years is that first, we have even been able to really, improve the quality and decrease by half, the amount of defects that we will find later in the cycle. We also been able to increase our time to market. That means between the moment we have a user story to the moment that a user story is implemented in our main archive version of our software. Okay, and the other thing that we also increased was our ability to integrate multiple changes faster than we used to. So right now we're able to have a full integration every 2 days. It used to be 2 months. In 2016, to give you an idea. And we are now working in our ability to integrate these changes on multiple times a day. And last but not least, we are in a very competitive environment to retain developers in particular. So it was very important for us to really increase, the satisfaction of our developers, the work environment they were with, and really agile work practice and agility at scale allowed us to do that.
Excellent. Thank you, Stella. Cécile, within your role at Société Générale as Chief Operations Officer, Global Banking and Investor Solutions, and Global Head of Technology Operations, how important is Agile for the organization? And especially, why is Agile at scale relevant now?
Well, for us, a bit like what Stella said, we launched Agile at scale in 2017, and actually it was a strong willingness to move the entire organization into the Agile at scale mode, because we strongly believe that is the way to secure the development quality, to accelerate development velocity, and also to be much more consistent with the business needs. And so today we have 80% of our 12,000 people who are in an Agile at scale working mode. and we'll be at 100% of all these teams next year. So it's almost over, I would say, and I would say we would not go back. I see a lot of benefits. I would say from a very operational one during the crisis. I think the fact that we were in an agile scale that goes beyond pure IT and tech ops. I would say because we include also back office, middle office, and sometimes front office in our agile scale setup in our teams. These teams were very autonomous and really were able to manage through the crisis extremely well, and we kept almost everything unchanged and in terms of development and release and all that. So that was a big strength. And then I would say going forward, and that's also what Stella said, but it's bringing the flexibility, the rapidity, the velocity in release that we need as we have more and more requirements. It can be changing also, and we need to be able to adjust. And what I like very much with Agile is also the proximity it created with the business, because you have the business as a product owner or the client, or it can be also risk, it can be compliance. And so there is this proximity that is recreated between technology teams and business people. And all of a sudden, they understand each other and they come up with much better idea, and it solves a lot of problem. And I've seen that on pure operations like back office, middle office. I've also seen that on front office. I've also seen that on sales side. So a lot of benefits from there.
Thank you, Cécile. Antoine and Rob, I'd be interested to get some of your thoughts as well, especially on how firms have navigated complex situations like the crisis, and how this proximity can help firms. If you have any further thoughts to add.
Yeah, sure. I guess the term agile, I think, is used in many ways. I think Gagan described the principles and the approach really, really well. Because it basically covers a set of values, principles, patterns, and methods to deliver solutions to problems in complex environments. That's the point. And by complex, we mean ones of frequent change, ambiguity, fragmented knowledge. And this describes the world and markets out there now in lots and lots of ways. And I think, therefore, this is why firms need to adopt it at scale. In a world of ambiguity, if we have a pretense around certainty years ahead, it's going to make delivery of the products and solutions that consumers and customers need now very, very hard. There's a genuine need for rapid feedback, iteration, and agility.
Thank you, Rob. This actually brings me to the second aspect I would like to cover today, which is drilling a bit more into how firms are looking at implementing Agile. Antoine, as Chief Operations Officer, Financial Markets and Lending, ING Wholesale Banking, could you give us your views on how ING is adopting Agile work practices?
Yeah. Well, at ING, we are down the track a bit. We also started 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and we did it on a divisional level. And when it came to wholesale banking and to capital markets, that's 3 years ago now. The whole thing came about really, just as Cécile said, a real sense of urgency to go faster. And also with us, it was built around the strategy to become the world's leading digital bank. And so that sense of urgency, I think, was very important. And then it was considered a key building block, and that really drives it. Then I think there are three important pieces. That's a sense of urgency. But the second is building the organization. Getting the organization in place, making sure that the governance is in place. That was a very important piece. Make sure that we have the right people in the right place, the right culture. And on the third piece, I'd say it was about getting the tooling in place, the metrics in place on how we're going to manage it, and that whole process was quite cumbersome, I'd say, because that is where the real change takes place. And today, I would say we are, our cross-functional teams are operating pretty effectively, and we're really starting to see the benefits. And I'd make the little side point that especially in these last a couple of months, we have definitely benefited from the fact that we've put in place these cross-functional teams. An important thing also to point out is you also need to know where it ends. When do you need two speeds? True end-to-end is very hard to achieve. So you also need to provide governance for where the agile cross-functional silos stop. It isn't truly end-to-end, and you can't let the teams just muddle on. So that's a little bit our journey, Emmanuel, and I'd say we are. We're there's still plenty of room to expand. Maybe looking at cross-firm collaboration, but that's where we are today.
Thank you, Anton. That's very interesting. I'm interested as well to get the perspective from a firm like Finality, which is a fintech firm. And Rob, for example, how does Finality look at Agile? Are there similarities to how a well-established bank like Société Générale, ING would look at Agile compared to a fintech like Finality? I know you touched on this already, but what are some of the benefits from your experience?
Sure, thanks, Emmanuel. So I think you're probably already picking a theme up here that everyone's sort of referencing organizational agility and organizational coverage. And I think that's true. So, I think Agile has a labeling problem. It's so often misunderstood as a process done at the delivery end of the organization in Scrum teams. And then at the top, you have like program managers and stakeholders looking at long view plans with certainty and costs and milestones. And I'd say this is the biggest barrier to success, as it needs to be top down, bottom up, organizationally adopted. If we put the word agile aside for a minute and ask the questions, do we want to be quick to react to market changes or slow to react? Do we want rapid time to market? Do we want real, genuine feedback loops? Do we want collaboration with our customers? And if we answer yes, then what would that look like? The answer is Agile. So for Finality, it's a top to bottom organizational approach to answering these questions. It's a mindset, a method that allows agility with a small a. That's really our view on it. And I think similarities probably, with the bigger organizations that have done it organizational, there'll be lots of similarities. The most common similarities where it isn't like that, I guess it's the processes, the ceremonies, stand-ups, retro sprints, but all of these are like good practice, but they're not agile. They're just ways of enabling agile or agility. And what you have to actually put in to be able to be agile is a lot harder. It's the harder part. And I guess, to be fair, it's a lot easier for a startup like ours, where we've designed our organizational foundations and frameworks, such as values, principles, ways of working with this in mind. But we really need to get everyone that deals with complex markets working top to bottom the same way. And then benefits. There are a multitude. I think everyone's referenced this, but time to market is one, and one of the biggest, because really time to market will lead to a competitive advantage. And if you think about an example of this in global markets that happened, so take the advancement in electronic trading, algorithmic advancements, I guess all of that led to short tail products where time to market delivery is a key differentiator. Profits made in the first cycle of a product, and everyone's then chasing diminishing returns. So for Finality, dealing with so much complexity around central banks, regulators, FMI, it's the same principle. Our mission down to our delivery via our models, ways of working, all need to align to enable quick learning, quick feedback loops, real honest understanding, and that there's a value stream that everyone understands.
Excellent, Rob. There's a point that I'd like to explore a little bit that Cecile and Stella and all the speakers touch on as well, is how Agile is actually helping different parts of the organization work together. Stella, my question is, would you say Agile is reshaping work practices? For example, has Agile informed Murex's response to COVID-19, where the workforce is more scattered and dispersed, for example?
Yeah, so first, just to bounce back on Rob's points, I fully agree with him. Like, you need to change it from top to bottom. So, for example, in our case, one of the big thing is that it starts with a product strategy. So we do have a product strategy, and basically, the way to implement that strategy and that decision that are made, in the product to deliver at the end value to our client is supported by the agility at scale that we have done, and we ensure that we really optimize, if you want, the way to deliver that value. But for me, one of the great success for an organization is this alignment, that everybody working in the same direction, everybody knows what the outcome is, and at the end of the day, it's the sum of all these different pieces. You make sure that at the end it does achieve the outcomes that you have set at the onset. And I think really this is a transformation that software company had to go through. It's easier for you because Rob, you started from scratch, but really once you do that, it's really from that point in time that you can start bringing value. So as you say, it's the COVID-19 crisis was a very interesting point in time because it was extremely challenging. However, if I look at it from a pure switch, it was pretty straightforward for a company like ours. Why? It's because we were already working in a virtual kind of environment. We have development site in multiple geographies. We had already invested as part of agility at scale in collaboration tools, and we already had a remote working capability enabled for 100% of our workforce. So the reality is that when things hit, and on top of that, all the practices and routines that we were describing, the ways that support agility, like the ceremonies, the scrums, the project increment, etc., it's very scripted. So it was pretty straightforward, to move this kind of predefined scripts into a virtual world. The part which was a little bit more challenging was more like the client interaction, because there was a big shift, moving from traditionally more face-to-face interaction during a project implementation, project scoping, design, etc. Show and tell session had to move to virtual. So it's a little bit more difficult to run because you can't really see everybody. You can't really assess, understand maybe clearly what each other are saying. So there was a bit of adjustment there. But all in all, yes, of course, being in that mode of working was a key enabler to manage, the crisis successfully.
I think we touched as well on some of there are multiple benefits very clearly of Agile adoption, but there are some, obviously, as we touched on a little bit upon some challenges, for example, on culture or changes needed in the organization. So this brings me to the third aspect I would like to cover today, looking at some of the barriers or challenges to Agile adoption. Antoine, for example, through your experience at ING, what are the links between company culture and Agile? Would you say a company culture needs to change to enable Agile?
Yes, is the answer. You do go from at scale. I mean, we'll build on the stuff that we'd maybe done in IT, where maybe it was a bit more obvious or at least the deliverable was clearer. When you adopt it at scale, I think my conclusion is that it did impact the culture, because you do go from a sort of top-down hierarchy to autonomous teams that really have to be collaborative. And I think that that adjustment was definitely there, because that sort of flatter structure where everybody is contributing to continuous improvement. And I wanted to really make the distinction between a delivery in terms of technology, where maybe it's a bit more clear, but we also implemented this across the board. For example, just in run operations. So also in run operations, create an environment where everybody is looking at continuous improvement. In the beginning, people tend to just focus on the rituals, but as it's already been said, it's not about the rituals, it's about the outcomes, and please don't make the rituals leading. So that culture of, hey, I'm also responsible for continuous improvement. I'm also responsible for collaboration. Yeah, that was a bit of a thing. So you see in the beginning strong contributors and those that grow in their contribution, and on the other side, you see people that maybe need to let go a bit, and also allow the teams to do their work, and also for them it is a cultural change. Then there's a very important aspect, which also just said about the rituals, is it's not just about that mindset and culture. It almost seems sometimes it leads you in that direction, but really it's about the overall structure. Yeah. So how is the governance organized around the autonomous teams, and do you because that's important. That's what will get you the results. That coupled with the mindset. Yeah, so in summary, I think the culture really does change, and importantly, so yeah.
Thank you, Antoine. Very, very interesting. I mean, it'd be great to hear the perspective from another bank. If I could go next to Cecile, just to see if those challenges are similar or consistent. What are some of the challenges you encountered during Societe Generale's Agile transformation journey? Was everyone prepared to work in Agile, or did you find resistance?
Let's say yes, there was a resistance, both within the technology teams and then the business teams. When I integrated also the middle and back office, of course, and it was as Antoine said, the main resistance at first was really this lack of command and control. I would say that the fact that intermediate management, even sometimes top management, you are completely changing their relationship to the team, so they have to mentor them, they have to coach them. So that's the first thing, and that was not so easy for. So some people had to be let go and so on, and that's I think it's an important fact to have in mind when you want really to move to Agile. The second thing is once we had got that is that I would say it started, you start with pilots, with small teams and so on. And then if you really want to go at scale on thousands and thousands of people, then it has to be a top management decision and a top management really drive. And this was the second very important change. So make it really an enterprise, or at least it was a wholesale, I would say, wholesale ambition to be completely an agile organization, because then and this drives the third pillar, which for me is also very important, is you need a skeleton, because agile teams are very autonomous, they're empowered, have all the skills, and that's great. But at a certain stage, you are an organization, you have a higher direction. I would say you need to make some arbitration, you need to be consistent, interoperable, and so on. And so you need a very strong architecture, you need very strong IT security, cyber security, operational norms to be maintained. So you need the business also. So you with all these normative bodies, if you want, to be extremely strong and present in every agile team. So and it's I would say all this balance is something that it takes time to be built, and also I believe will have to be nurtured going forward, to make sure that we always keep this good balance between autonomy, empowerment, and kind of let's say interoperability, norms, etc.
Yes, there seems to be a really important role for orchestration.
Overall, maybe if I can conclude, yes. To finish, I think we've been through all that change management, and today people are extremely positive on the whole change. So it's not like they are still resistant or they would like to go back. It's not at all the case. So it's I think it's very much in the culture, but it takes some time, and it takes some change management effort.
I would be interested to hear more about this orchestration aspect, which in large organization is very important. So, for example, Gagan, turning to a global professional service firm like UI, what changes or tools can support firms with this adoption? How do you advise clients on their transformation journey?
Yeah, it's a great question, Emmanuel. I think Antoine and Cecile, Rob, Stella have all touched on aspects of what needs to be in place for a successful to create a successful agile environment. I would, and obviously, your end state is an organization that is able to operate at speed and in an environment of uncertainty. I would suggest that kind of, distilling that into a number of things, that there are four kind of key building blocks to put in place. And in my mind, in order of criticality, the first one in my mind is sort of technical tool sets. Collaboration tools, mural teams, whatever it is that you use. Visualization tools to ensure that metrics are available to all that need them, sandbox environments, physical environments, the right infrastructure security, as Cecile brought out, etc. So that's kind of the basic sort of stuff that is at the bottom there. The next one, there's a really important and critical area around kind of common language and understanding. So people are operating to the same lingua franca. They have playbooks, they have templates for backlogs, sprint plans, communications toolkits, etc. And everybody's kind of on the same page as far as what is agile, what does it mean for us as an organization, and what does it mean for me as an individual in that organization. The third one, and now we're getting into the really critical elements, and everybody has touched on this, is skilled people and the right governance. So you need a critical mass of coaches, of scrum masters, you need communities of practice, you need people that trainers training others, etc. But I think the point that Antoine and Cecile both made around governance is absolutely critical in this, that and actually our observation across the market is that probably the biggest challenge is moving from the traditional command and control governance of kind of micromanagement of everything to that culture of letting go, allowing the teams to succeed or fail, and to direct themselves, is really hard. But without it, you can't go any further than that. So a critical mass of skilled people and the right governance that ensures that the decisions are made at the right level in the organization. And then the fourth piece then, and this is the most critical in my mind, is mindset. Mindset. This is a mindset that is open and transparent and flexible, where people want to work across the silos that they used to work in, that they're prepared to go back to square one if they have to go back to square one, and that they're empowered, to my governance point, that they're empowered to work across boundaries and set their own paths. And I think just to add to that final point, that one of the things we found, one of the determinants of success in organizations that have implemented Agile at scale versus those who are sort of trying to do so, is this concept of belief versus understanding. So the people that thrive in an Agile environment are those who really believe it. And belief is not the same. It's not just enough to just get it in theory. You have to believe in it. You have to go the extra mile in the cell within which you work, and you have to be prepared to work in a completely different way than you ever have in the past, and that requires belief.
Thank you, Gagan. Really interesting, and especially I wanted to touch a little bit on the collaboration aspect. For example, Stella, would you say that Agile has helped increase collaboration between Murex and its clients, such as investment banks?
Yeah, definitely, because I'm going to say one of the main things is that from our perspective, the definition of done is when a change is in the end of, the end user, okay? It doesn't stop at, we deliver a software, it's when it's used. And definitely, that last mile is a result of collaboration between us, our client, and third parties, whether system integrators, multi-parties that can be involved. So the fact that we are all speaking the same language, to start with, that we are all sharing the same tools and practices has really improved collaboration and make it a lot more transparent, to achieve the right outcome. If I look at it now, we have example where from the requirement we share the same code of repository, all the changes are made in parallel, and with the cloud on top of that, it's becoming easier and easier to make sure that we work in the same way. So you kind of increase collaboration, increase communication, and at the end of the day, you ensure that everybody benefit from the work practice. And one thing which is very interesting because, and I think Cecile touched on this, for us, the business, if you want, is our client, okay? And for us, the ultimate goal is to make sure that in this journey towards agility at scale, we bring our client with us. For example, I'm just going to give you some figures, but what we want to do is to be able to test the same thing to make sure that when a change arrives to the production of environment of a client, there is no bugs detected because we found them a lot earlier and we corrected them before it goes into the client organization. And this really require a different way of working to be able to bring this constant and continuous changes up to the last mile, which is the client side. So for us, definitely there is no way back. We're really looking, in the next few years to bring our client base with us into that journey.
Thank you, Stella. Rob, it'd be great to get your perspective as well on collaboration, just to see if there's similarities with Stella.
Yes, definitely. I think Finality has had to be a champion of this. We're creating a peer-to-peer wholesale settlement system that offers real-time payment based on decentralized principles and DLT technology, with the goal to provide the pay leg for token asset settlement. And I guess all of that requires extensive ecosystem collaboration between us, participant banks, FMIs, partners, central banks, regulators. And so we can be organizationally agile, top to bottom, but we've had to go beyond that. We've taken our board and our shareholders with us on this journey, our partners too. We've had agile contracts for engagement. We provide what I'd call agile intersection through our engagement models, all of this to collaborate. And this helps with our success because it provides, that transparency, focus on outcomes, focus on the value streams, a shared consciousness for our ecosystem. Stella mentioned this, and Antoine actually. One of the successes that happens to delivery change, is communication. Communication is all about language. Language is about understanding what people mean when they say something. And it's as simple as that. It sounds slightly strange in a way, but two people can say the same word and it can have totally different meanings. And having a shared consciousness and a shared understanding of what you're trying to achieve with shared language is really, really important. We've gone on a real journey, as I say, and I think we've had some phenomenal results considering the huge challenge at hand. But like all participants in our thing, we've got a way to go for sure.
Thank you, Rob. There's a really interesting theme as well. I think all the speakers touched on is sort of working more closely together as well reduces risk. So I'd be interested to hear as well this aspect in. For example, Cecile, would you say that Agile has helped enable a better mitigation of risk on certain project delivery? For example, delivering on time or meeting customer expectations?
Yes, definitely. Even though I would say to start with that it's not, Agile can make some people afraid. Let's say people more, I would say, from the risk or compliance who are used to the V model and can be very much afraid of not having very clear or set in stone deadlines and so on. But that being said, after that, I think definitely, or the experience, I would say, shows that it brings a lot of value in terms of risk. So management of project risk first, because you have this very constant feedback loop. So you can adjust very rapidly. You have meetings with the product owner, with the product manager very frequently. You have everybody around the team. And then if you have continuous delivery, continuous testing, this brings also a lot. I think it's not just the agile organization, but it's also all the tools that go with it that improves really the quality of your delivery and the quality of your project delivery as a whole. Second thing is also something I noticed that now that we have grouped IT and operations together, that now the same person is in charge of the IT and the processes that be, let's say, middle office, back office. All of a sudden, we see a decrease or clear improvement of our processes because you build it, you run it, really creates value. So the fact that people are together, that the same team, I would say, develops, runs, has the guys who use the system together in the team, creates a lot of, naturally mitigation and reduction of risk. And it makes people also, I would say, more ingenious. So they would, whenever an issue arises, then I would say they would come up with the right ideas because you have this right mix of tech and non-tech people. And very often tech people can find solutions. But they need for that to understand and to be closer to the user than they sometimes are in a more traditional setup. So all in all, yes. Last thing I would say, maybe to it's all the IT risk, cybersecurity, all these topics. You have to be extremely strict because you need to have some measures and make sure that things follow. The teams follow the rules, clearly prioritize whatever you want to push as risk management, risk mitigation, because this can be a risk of the agile setup because of this empowerment.
Thank you, Cécile. And I think the industry has, over a number of years now, been very focused on implementing many regulatory requirements, MiFID, Basel, as well as operational resilience. Could Agile help firms manage regulatory requirements effectively? Gagan, for example.
Yeah, it's this question is coming up time and time again now, and actually more rapidly, as you would expect it to. I think Cécile has described brilliantly all of the advantages that come from taking an agile approach, and I certainly wouldn't seek to add to that. Having said that, I'm not ideological about agile, and I think it's suitable for many things. Sometimes it's not. But as we said, it is suitable in uncertain, changing environments where requirements are unclear, where you want to achieve potentially a culture change around collaboration and speed and innovation, and where you want an outcome that is far more closely aligned to your stakeholders' needs. And I deliberately use the word stakeholder rather than customer there, because clearly your regulator can be your stakeholder. So I think absolutely Agile is it fits that bill. Many regulatory initiatives fit that bill perfectly, and so we shouldn't shy away from using Agile for regulatory type initiatives. The bottom line is that the beauty of Agile is that you don't need to wait for months or years to know if you're going to be compliant. You will continuously know whether you are on the right path, and will able to course correct to ensure that you are. So the short answer, Emmanuel, is yes, you should certainly consider Agile for regulatory type work. But I would suggest that there's a bit of a sting in the tail, and that is that you need your stakeholders to be as agile as you are. If you need if you're finding that your stakeholders, and it's not just the regulators, it's third parties as well, often, from outside the bank, And if you are finding that they are slowing down the speed and agility of your internal, best-in-class agile capability, then things become quite difficult. So I think one of the things to be comfortable with is, before you go down that route, is to understand the appetite of your regulator and your third parties and anybody else in your ecosystem to be able to move as fast and with the same agility as you can.
Excellent, thank you. In the context of digital transformation, we're seeing many initiatives like regulatory sandboxes or other type of initiatives where multiple stakeholders are working together around a solution. So it seems like around the process of digital transformation, it often requires firms to work with multiple stakeholders across different teams, external parties, or even clients. Antoine, would you say that Agile can facilitate this process as well?
Yes, it can. But what Gagan just said, it's not an ideology. Yeah. So you need to know the boundaries. So I think, when you're in that, clearly the answer has to be yes. But so you want to benefit from all those pieces: the risk management, the fail fast, the cost containment, getting results early, building on successes. But you also want to know, you don't want to cross boundaries. Yeah, that the regulator's job is their job. Your relationship with a supplier is a commercial one. So I think you need to set those boundaries and call it almost two speed. Yeah. For the same, by the way, even internally agile, when you have something which is completely internal to your company, you also have natural demarcations where it stops working because it's cross divisional, or the function is driven completely separately. So I think it's about understanding with the stakeholder that you are seeking to develop something with, what is the agile piece and what is not. So sort of a two-speed approach there. And by doing that, you're not throwing out the good, because otherwise both parties can become very dogmatic about it. And I suppose that's the key point here: is don't be dogmatic about it, and use both to get the best out of it. And I know ING has, we have some situations where we do exactly that with firms. We know the bit that we are good for each other to be agile, and also to have good agreements around that, what is mine and what is yours. So on the regulatory front, I don't, but I can imagine with the regulatory piece, you can also make those agreements without crossing the line of the supervisor.
Yes, so Agile is not a one-size-fits-all, but it does have to come with a range of different things and as well be appropriate. So
Yeah.
Rob, for example, Finality, you're working with banks and other industry participants on peer-to-peer financial markets. How do you see the interrelationship between Agile and digital transformation?
Sure. I think Agile, as I think referenced earlier, has definitely enabled the multilateral collaboration, the needed across legal, reg, technology, commercial, finance, to be in step with achieving the outcomes. So having an ecosystem you can get comfortable with ambiguity, rapid change through feedback loops is all really, really important. I think I echo previous statements, though it's not without its challenges where Agile meets traditional. I think, though, the two-tier system on that, though, so the transparency. So one of the things we've done is the engagement model. So at the point of creating, aligned backlogs, even if it's coming from a waterfall customer or regulator, we have for sure the black holes, but we know what we can get on with, and we know the dependencies, and we know the incremental steps, even if they're larger and not as broken down as you'd like them to be, in an agile method. And communication, so the transparency, communication, and honesty about the difference is how you can get success in that regard. So my advice would definitely be to the wider ecosystem is that, you've got the complexity, you've got the speed of change. We need to adapt for sure. It does fit to most things, definitely to regulation as well. I mean, if you look at risk generally, the smaller the risk, the better. So if we can break things down, fix forwards, as I say, provide transparency, all of those things definitely help in this area.
Thank you, Rob. Just turning to Stella, I mean, are there any further remarks or thoughts on the relationship between Agile and digital transformation?
Yes, definitely. I agree with what we say. Is a two type of approach. If I look at regulation, for example, I feel personally that Agile is a great complement, okay, of regulatory implementation, because by nature, regulation require a lot of consultation across multiple party. So the process is always the same. You start having, a first draft, then there will be a FAQ, clarification, an iteration and iteration. So if in parallel of these processes, you can start leveraging, agile work methodology and built in the way you implement the changes, this iterative process, actually that means that you will be able to address the latest change that will arrive late, because you know that the final text will be late and you'll have a limited time to implement it. And a very good example that we are living through right now is the IBOR reform, for example, where you have multiple parties across the globe, each going at different speed, changes happening in the UK or in the US on the software, Europe is different, Singapore again, etc. So the fact that we and our client are working in an agile manner allows us to start the changes and the adaptation, but recognizing that we'll have to keep some for the last mile. So to me, I see really agile as a complement and actually a good process to overcome some of the challenges that are linked to regulatory changes.
Excellent. Thank you, Stella. So we're just getting close to the end of the allocated time, and I'd like to leave a few minutes for the Q&A. I can see there's a few questions asked. So if I could ask a final question to each panelist as a closing remark. So what would be the single most important aspect to make Agile work at scale across the enterprise? And if I could start with you, Cécile, please.
I would say it's tone from the top. Really, for me, it starts with that.
Excellent. Thank you. And Stella, would you like to go next, please?
I'm very in line with Cécile. I'll just do a slight variation. You start with a strategy, and then everything else, comes from there. So align your strategy, and that's the best way to be successful.
Antoine?
Yeah, clearly the two most important, but I'd say continuous improvement, consistency. It does come through time. I think it'll get better as it gets as you keep going at it.
Thank you, Antoine. Rob?
I'm afraid I'm going to be consistent. So I think I said at the beginning there seems to be a thread building, and I completely concur that the single most important aspect is organization top to bottom approach with enabled culture. So something that focuses on people, collaboration, and interactions over processes and tools is it has to be that way around for success.
Again, do we have a similar answer as the other panelists? Or
Unfortunately, I can't be a dissenting voice. Three things. Mindset, and mindset. Top to bottom, front to back.
excellent. Thank you. If I could just pull up the Q&A so we have an opportunity to answer some of the questions asked. So the first question is, which Agile practices have most supported teams working remotely, and which practices, if any, been difficult to recreate in a remote environment? I know we touched on some aspects around COVID and some of the challenges around a scattered and dispersed workforce. Would any of the panelists like to take this question?
I think so. I'm happy to have a look at this. I I think a couple of the other speakers, it was easy to pivot to remote working, and then we pivoted again to remote, what we call a remote first culture. I guess there aren't any particular things that are harder than others. It's actually some of the fundamentals which we've talked about having in place, such as governance. So you need to make sure that you've got systems. So we use mutual accountability and everyone understands what they need to do. That's really important, those principles that allow decentralization of decisions and all of those things are in place. I guess, there is the only thing that remote working sort of stops is that physical, I guess the part of the Agile piece you'd call painstorming, which is like the Agile version of brainstorming. In a physical room with a whiteboard and everyone talking together, there is a definite, people talk about a definite collaboration piece there that they miss, that physical sort of presence in a room. You can replicate it online, and lots of decent tools to allow whiteboarding and that kind of stuff. But feedback from the employees is that piece is the piece they miss the most, for sure. They find the hardest, which is less about Agile. It's just the reality of being remote.
You have to agree with Rob. Really, the big issue is everything related to ideation, where when you need really to get collaboration for new ideas. So everything which is, I will say, in process, it's great, it's fine, it's going to work. But for everything new you want to start, as I say, you need to start with a strategy, and that's the piece, in the process, which will be the most difficult to achieve remotely, because at the end of the day, it's through close interaction and iteration of different people with different mindset backgrounds that you get the best results.
Thank you, Stella. I'll cover another question as well, which I think is actually a bit more at the bottom, around regulation and Agile. So the question is, regulatory implementations or commitments tend to be top-down led and have fixed due dates. Any advice on how, sorry, the question just disappeared. I think it was generally just any advice on how regulation could work with Agile. So just keen to hear if there are further thoughts on this so we can discuss this a bit more.
I can maybe take this one. So definitely the difficulty of regulatory topics is that very often they are cross teams. So you're going through several feature teams or PMT or project management teams and so on. So you still need this coordination with project management, and it's more the trained approach. And it takes a lot of skills, I would say, to set this up. And it takes a lot of coordination to make sure that the various feature teams will free the capacity that is needed for the regulatory project as when things get clearer and they have the requirements more precise. So it's a lot of coordination, actually. It's you need to have some kind of planning. You cannot go like that, and it's not true. And also because you have very strong commitments. And so there you really need to have very skilled craft people and project manager, train managers that can do it, and very strong coordination, communication. And actually, for example, when we turned to full remote, it was not so easy to do these ceremonies with us. You have very often 100, 150 people working on a big regulatory projects. So, you need also to think about how you animate that and how you do these ceremonies remotely, and so on. That's another complexity.
Yeah,
Sorry, Anton.
Sorry, go ahead, Gabe.
I'd agree with that. I think it's okay not to take an Agile approach in particular situations, or to take a best of breed approach where you're taking the best of Agile and combining it with the more traditional approaches. I think the other point that is important to make is that not every regulation is crystal clear and set in stone. So Stella mentioned IBOR. And anybody that's working in any kind of IBOR change program, that will be absolutely apparent to them. So actually, in that situation, it's perfectly fine to take an Agile approach to it. As long as you're coming at it from a point of view of what's the best approach to solve the problem in hand.
Yeah, I was going to make the point just to add to that when you're dealing with regulatory deliverables, the steering just needs to be the oversight just needs to be a little bit tighter, and that works well.
Excellent, thank you, and just to really send an appreciation to all the speakers today for this excellent panel and for taking all those questions. Thank you very much. I'll now close the discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So please join me in thanking the panel for this excellent discussion on adopting Agile work practices at scale within European wholesale markets. Again, I would like to thank our partners who have supported us throughout this event, in particular Murex, EY, and Finality, who took part in today's session. I would now like to say a special thank you to all the speakers who have taken part in our webinar series this week. We greatly appreciate your time, input, and invaluable insights. We hope you have found these discussions interesting and insightful as we prepare for 2021. Hopefully, we can welcome you again next year at our annual Technology and Innovation Conference in Paris. That, fingers crossed, will be held in person next November. Please feel free to stay on the platform to make the most of your networking opportunities throughout the day. Also, if you miss any of the sessions, you will be able on the platform to access them from Monday. Enjoy the rest of your day.